Hey everyone. Almost 3 years ago, I discovered Punishing Grey Raven due to its Nier Automatas collab, and I started playing it because I was interested in its combat. It was my first gacha game, but at the time, I was still an innocent man, and I didn't even know what that meant. A gacha game? Anyway, I didn't particularly care about the story. It was just there. But I like reading, and since I initially hated the start of some of my favorite books, I gave the story a chance, and I slowly started to like it more and more. PGR story is relatively simple at the start, but it becomes fairly intricate as it goes on. It isn't over yet, but it's been 5 years, and we just reached the end of a major narrative arc, so I decided to make a recap video about it, especially since it can be quite hard to get into it. First of all, it's a gacha game, and most people don't want to get into one. Or, well, into another one. The visual novel style of narrative is also not for everyone, but its biggest filter are the starting chapters. They work as a decent world building foundation, but together with their very outdated gameplay that you have to deal with in certain parts, it's definitely not the greatest experience. That said, the story develops in an interesting way, with a real sense of progression instead of being a series of mostly self-contained chapters. At this point, the story is very long, and to avoid a 10 hours video, there are many great characters and storylines that I won't even mention here. Not because they're not important, but because they're not strictly necessary to understand the overall story. I'll try to focus on the most important events, providing brief explanations for the initial chapter so that I can go a bit more in depth in the final ones. After all, the purpose of this video is to hopefully spark enough interest so that more people will experience the full story themselves. Anyway, you could have skipped all this part. Let's get into it. A few decades ago, humanity was at the peak of a golden age, which brought forth many technological advancements, until, one day, the punishing outbreak happened. At this stage, no one knew what this contamination was and what caused it, but its effects were devastating. Labeled punishing virus as some sort of divine punishment toward humanity, this contamination will outright kill humans and infect machines, turning them into corrupted with the primary objective of exterminating humanity. In the following decades, a good amount of the population was wiped out. Many cities were abandoned, and as humanity's elite evacuated to Babylonia, a massive space station initially built for interstellar travel, countless of refugees were left behind. Some cities managed to survive utilizing purification filters, but since the spots were limited, not everyone was admitted in these areas, so most survivors didn't have a safe place to live in. Since the outbreak, the goal of humanity has been to defeat the punishing virus and fully reclaim Earth. One of the major ways to fight against the horde of corrupted machines was the deployment of constructs. Constructs were originally regular humans that went through a dangerous procedure that turned their bodies into machines. Constructs have increased combat capabilities, allowing them to deal with corrupted machines more easily, but they can still be infected by the virus. In order to counter that, constructs possess an invert device, an advanced technology that provides some protection against the virus. The invert device also allows regular humans to establish a connection to a construct's mind, their mechanized consciousness, to prevent them from turning into corrupt. As a Babylonian commandant, this is our role. We are the Commandant of Grey Raven, an elite task force that's regularly sent down on the surface for various missions, and Lucia, Liv, and Lee are the constructs in our team. Especially in its early experimental stages, turning into a construct was extremely dangerous. Many will die during the procedure, and the invert device, despite being designed as a protection against the virus, could cause an infection. This is what happened to Luna, Lucia's younger sister, when she was turned into a construct. Despite being a child, Luna was discarded as soon as she showed signs of infection, but she never became a corrupted. Her mind was strong enough to resist the corruption, but after being used and betrayed, together with the loss of her sister, her hatred towards humanity festered, and she was chosen to become an agent of the Ascension Network. The Ascension Network is some sort of hive mind created by the punishing virus, and one of its primary directives is to eliminate humanity, which is why corrupted machines behave in such a way. The other purpose of the Ascension Network is to find other strong-willed candidates that can withstand the punishing virus, filtering the weak and forcing some sort of evolutionary process. The constructs that pass this filtering are called Ascendants, and they acquire the ability to control the punishing virus, making themselves stronger and able to command the lesser corrupted. Luna's purpose, as the agent of the Ascension Network, is to lead the Ascendants against humanity. Lucia is also turned into a construct, but unaware of what had happened to her sister, she becomes a Babylonian soldier. She was originally assigned to Grey Raven under the lead of another commandant. However, during one of their missions, Lucia and the rest of her team were betrayed by this person, who was tricked by another Ascendant. After the death of her teammates, Lucia was infected by the punishing virus. Luna found her sister before she could turn into a corrupted, and helped her pass the Ascension Network filtering, allowing her to become an Ascendant that will be known as Alpha. Before being rescued by Luna, since they knew about their connection to an Ascendant, Babylonia made a copy of Lucia's mind, but to ensure her loyalty, they erased most of her memories and acted as if this event had never happened. This new Lucia is the captain of Grey Raven, our first teammate once we assume the role of Commandant, and despite sharing the same initial mind as Alpha, their path will diverge significantly. Initially, Luna's goal is to recruit new members, and Roland, one of her Ascendants, attempts to persuade the most promising constructs to defect Babylonia. However, almost no one survives the filtering process of the Ascension Network, and Grey Raven is often dispatched to handle the newly infected corrupted. Eventually, Luna decides to escalate her plans, and her Ascendants attack the city of Golong. Her goal is to retrieve Washu, a powerful AI that can rival Gestalt, Babylonia's AI, which is essential for Babylonia's survival and the fight against the punishing virus. Grey Raven and other task force teams intervene to protect the city, confronting the Ascendant, but in the end, Chu, Golong's monarch, allows Luna to take Washu. Not long after that battle, Luna uses Washu to hack into Gestalt. She attempts to make Babylonia crash from orbit, but Grey Raven was able to prevent it and locate their position in City 076. Upon reaching the city, Grey Raven discovered an unusual concentration of punishing virus in the form of a red liquid, a substance that can absorb everything that it enters in contact with. This liquid will be labeled Red Tide, an evolved form of punishing virus that can disassemble and reproduce anything that was previously absorbed. This property allows the Red Tide to absorb living beings and spawn new lifeforms called Hetero creatures. After failing to destroy Babylonia, Luna begins to doubt herself and the Ascension Network. Especially after uniting with her sister, Luna started to wish that their condition could be reversed, returning to be regular humans. Because of this weakness, Luna is betrayed by Gabriel, one of her Ascendants, and uses food to nurture a stronger Hetero creature. Grey Raven, held by Alpha, Lamia, and Roland, the Ascendants that are still loyal to Luna, defeat the Hetero creature before Luna can be fully consumed by it. However, in the aftermath of the encounter, Luna is secretly captured by Kurono, a shady organization known for their many illegal experiments on constructs technology. The same people that turned her into a construct and then discarded her after showing signs of infection. After betraying Luna, Gabriel joins Vonnegut, another agent of the Ascension Network. Vonnegut and his Ascendants are experimenting on the Red Tide, nurturing it to develop stronger Hetero creatures. Since its first appearance in City 076, the Red Tide kept expanding at a rapid pace, reaching other cities and settlements, and despite Babylonia's attempt to slow down its progress, its ultimate expansion seems inevitable. Eventually, Vonnegut's experiments give birth to the Hetero Twins, extremely evolved creatures that almost wiped out Grey Raven and prevented Babylonia from sending support teams to the surface. Using the data previously retrieved from Atlantis, an abandoned base with one of the few zero-point reactors ever made, Babylonia was able to produce the first Omega weapons. Zero-point reactors, developed at the end of the Golden Age, were supposed to provide an almost unlimited source of energy, but activating one of these reactors was the original cause of the outbreak. By reversing that process, the Omega weapons were able to absorb the punishing virus, and Babylonia designed a new frame that could utilize these weapons, Liv's Imperia frame. With it, Liv was able to obliterate the Hetero creatures, saving everyone that had been stranded on the surface, but at a severe cost. The Imperia frame was still a prototype, deployed early only because of the dire circumstances. Having nowhere else to go, the absorbed punishing virus was corrupting Liv's mind, killing her from inside. Lucia and the Commandant had to establish a forced connection in order to stabilize her, risking their life until she could switch back to her older frame. When first encountered, Nanami appears to be just a cheerful construct of unknown origin. However, she is an awakened machine, an AI that developed self-awareness and the ability to feel emotions. She is the first of her kind, and through her actions, other machines start to awaken. Without her even knowing, she becomes their sage, the leader of the Church of Machina. Nanami's dream is to shape a world where humans and machines can live happily together, but as she explores the future through countless of simulations, run both by herself and even aided by Gestalt, she starts to realize that such a future seems impossible. The probability of humanity surviving the punishing virus and the endless winter that will follow its ultimate disappearance is almost zero, but in every future, humans and machines will inevitably clash against each other. The only solution to give humans even a slight chance of survival will be to gather her fellow mechanoids and leave Earth. Thanks to her simulations, Nanami enters in contact with a future version of herself and learns about the crucial events that are necessary to achieve the future that she wants to obtain. Aided by Ishmael, a mysterious construct that works in Babylonia, Nanami had contributed in preventing both Liv and the Commandant's death during her previous encounter with the twins. And when the Church of Machina attempts to attack Babylonia, Nanami intervenes to stop them, finally assuming a role as their leader so that she can guide them towards the correct path. After the twins' incident, Carolina is sent to the moon to reactivate the zero-point reactor in order to produce more Omega weapons. Once there, she meets Luna, imprisoned by a massive Omega weapon that keeps absorbing her punishing virus, leaving her in a weakened state. After capturing her in City-076, Kurono used Luna to study the Ascension Network, hoping to conquer the punishing virus by finding a way to turn all humans into Ascendants. As she attempts to reactivate the reactor, Carolina discovers that it was infected. The base on the moon had been used to experiment on the Inver device, which uses the virus itself as an antigen, and that was why Luna had been infected when she became a construct. Roland, despite having joined Vonnegut after Luna's capture, was still loyal to her. She had saved him from the punishing infection, making him into an Ascendant, and now he wanted to repay that debt. With Alpha's help, Roland reaches the moon and uses the stem cell of a powerful Hetero creature provided by Vonnegut to disrupt the Omega weapon. Once free, Luna reestablishes a connection to the Ascension Network, but after her recent experiences, starting from reuniting with her sister and then meeting the other Lucia and the Commandant, Luna realizes that despite her hatred, her real wish is to find a way for Ascendants to coexist with humans. With this newfound determination, Luna helps Carolina deal with the infected reactor, then she returns on her and rejoins her sister. Bianca, captain of the Purifying Force, a special task force that deals with Babylonia's defectors, is sent to investigate the disappearance of her vice-captain Chico, who had been investigating an underwater facility named Copperfield Aquarium. To aid her with the mission, Bianca's new frame comes with a Phantom Tracer, a new device that can absorb the punishing virus and use its data to recreate past events. Similarly to the Imperial frame, utilizing the Phantom Tracer is quite dangerous, and the Commandant has to stabilize Bianca's mind fairly often to prevent corruption. Eventually, Bianca discovers that Chico had been led to the aquarium by Lithus, one of Vonnegut's Ascendants. It was a trap, but before she can conclude her investigation, Red Tide breaches the aquarium. Almost everyone manages to evacuate before the facility is fully submerged, but Bianca is swallowed by the Red Tide. A humanoid Hetero creature saves her, and through the data received by the Phantom Tracer as she escapes to the surface, Bianca discovers that it was Chico, forcibly mutated into a monster by Lithus. On the surface, Babylonia Task Force teams led by the Commandant deploy a large amount of Omega weapons to stop the Red Tide from spreading into the sea, and eventually, Bianca confronts the now fully corrupted Chico. Future Nanami, taking advantage of the high concentration of punishing virus in the area, sends crucial information to the past in the form of a Hetero shard, which will be retrieved by Bianca's Phantom Tracer after eliminating her old friend. In Babylonia, Lei is conducting the final test for his new hyperreal frame when a massive red tower suddenly appears on Earth. The tower emits punishing virus, and its signals are so powerful that they reach even Babylonia, making many humans and constructs go insane. The only two that seem to know this tower are Vonnegut and Ishmael, but they were not expecting its sudden appearance. Hyperreal, being the first frame with a stable Omega weapon, is fully immune to the punishing virus, making Lei the only person that can approach and enter the tower in the attempt of stopping what's happening. Upon entering the tower, since the hyperreal frame incorporates data from the Hetero shard received from Nanami, Lei realizes that he can use the tower to interact with different timelines. Similarly to the Nanami and Luna simulation, respectively aided by Gestalt and the Ascension Network, Lei experiences countless doomed futures. He discovers that the hyperreal frame does not exist in any other timeline, and he utilizes the tower to make small changes to the past, confirming that they were necessary steps to achieve the results of this timeline. At the top of the tower, Lei encounters an Observer, a higher dimensional being that monitors the development of civilizations. Thanks to the hyperreal frame, Lei utilizes the data obtained from the other timelines to defeat a projection of the Observer, acquiring the authority to pass the gate connected to the tower and become a higher dimensional being himself. However, since that will mean abandoning the rest of humanity, Lei refuses and instead chooses to rewrite the tower's function. Instead of releasing punishing virus, the tower is now able to absorb it, purifying it and creating a clean zone in its surroundings. After leaving the tower, Lei's memories of everything that he experienced inside of it are erased, and he loses access to the tower. After Lei's interference with the Hetero Tower, the Ascension Network begins a process of refiltering in order to find stronger representatives. The process is affecting all Ascendants, but especially Alpha, since the Ascension Network deems her strong enough to become a new agent. However, since Lucia's mind is a copy of Alpha and her current plume frame is made utilizing Alpha's combat data, the Ascension Network is also interfering with her mind, attempting to also make her into an Ascendant. Informed respectively by Luna and Asimov, Alpha and Lucia learn that the Ascension Network signals that are interfering with her mind are originating from Port Winter, an abandoned Kurono facility. Before reaching the facility, Alpha is forcefully reshaped by the Ascension network, and after a brief confrontation with Lucia, they agree to collaborate in order to shut down the network signals coming from the facility. During their exploration, they discovered that Luna had been imprisoned there before being transported to the moon, and that she had been used to study the Ascension network and the development of specialized frames. After finding the device that taps into the Ascension network, Alpha connects to it, and with Lucia's help, she manages to shut it down, permanently cutting their connection to the network. Lilith, another Ascendant, was sent to Fort Winter by Vonnegut to retrieve important data on Project Ctilla, an old experiment about the digitization of people's consciousness. She challenges Alpha to test her strength, but after being defeated, she shares the retrieved data and destroys the facility. Thanks to the clean zone produced by the Hetero Tower, many conservation areas and towns are built in its vicinity. However, despite being stopped before it could reach the ocean, the red tide kept expanding on land, where it continued to absorb and mutate everything it touched. This area, called Hetero Zone, kept spawning stronger and more intelligent hetero creatures, quickly reducing the amount of available living areas in the planet. During one of our missions, the Commandant helps a fugitive construct named Eliza. We discover that she was a victim of Corona's experiments, and the consciousness of all her friends had been fused together inside her mechanical companion. This type of experiment is very similar to the data Project Ctilla retrieved on Fort Winter, a procedure that will fuse the consciousness of multiple people into one in order to produce a stronger mind. However, when the Commandant was about to return to Babylonia after the mission, the transport crashes into a river of red tide. The Commandant wakes up in an Ascendant base at the bottom of the sea, a base where Lidas was conducting experiments on Project Ctilla. Infected by the punishing virus, we know that we don't have much time left, and as we explore the base, we meet Lamia, an Ascendant sent by Luna to gather information, but that's currently disguised as another construct. Together, we try to find a way to escape from the base and disrupt Lida's plans. However, after being discovered by another Ascendant, Lamia's confrontation ends up awakening Ctilla. Similarly to the Hive model that spawned the twins, Lidas was using the red tide to fuse countless of consciousnesses into Ctilla, with the ultimate goal of hatching even stronger hetero creatures. Lamia escapes with one of Ctilla's eggs, and through it, she starts experiencing countless futures, just like Lee did when he explored the Hetero Tower. But this time, there were also memories of people whose consciousness had been harvested to feed Ctilla. Eventually, Lamia defeats Ctilla, and as we die from the punishing infection, our consciousness fuses with the dying creature, easing her suffering as we share the pain caused by the countless voices in her mind. Being a mermaid, Lamia escapes from the base with the egg, and following our last wish, she attempts to deliver it to a group of humans on the surface. However, we are with those humans. The person that she had been with all this time was a clone. We had been rescued long ago. Before leaving, Lamia gives us the egg, together with a sequence of numbers provided by her clone, a code that no one else will be able to recognize. Despite Ctilla's early awakening, Vonnegut used another egg to hatch a young hetero creature using our DNA, a creature that he named Chaos. As the Hetero Zone keeps growing, a new creature also rises from the red tide. This creature calls herself Cradle, and even if she doesn't fully understand them, she appears and behaves almost exactly like a human. Similar to an agent of the Ascension network, she is instead the wheel of the red tide, and her goal is to assimilate human civilizations. Many great inventions of the Golden Age, the decades that preceded the punishing outbreak, were developed by the Science Council led by Dominic. Babylonia, Gestalt, the zero-point reactor, Ever devices, all these inventions are because of this legendary figure from the past. After the outbreak, Dominic sacrificed himself to deactivate the zero-point reactor, but he secretly left behind the memory data of himself inside of Gestalt, where they can still communicate with one another. They are very aware of the punishing virus, and they seem to know much more about it than anyone else. Every creation and decision taken by Dominic was meant to give humanity a chance of survival, but all this knowledge cannot be shared directly. Being a machine, Gestalt was partially infected by the punishing virus during the outbreak, and it had to shut itself down to prevent further corruption that would have been devastating for humanity. Even after being relocated in Babylonia, the corrupted part of Gestalt still remains sealed behind a data wall, and any interference from within could spread this contamination. Despite this risk, Dominic intervenes to prevent an escalation between Babylonia and the Forsaken. The Forsaken are a military faction led by Watanabe, a soldier of the Golden Age that chose to remain on Earth and help the people left behind during the Great Evacuation. Despite his resentments towards Babylonia, his priority has always been the well-being of the people on Earth, becoming a well-respected leader that has worked with us in multiple occasions. However, betrayed by his uncle Ballard, Watanabe almost dies, and in its absence, Ballard uses the Forsaken to incite a revolt against Babylonia. When Gestalt had been infected, one of the corrupted commands that he received was to launch ballistic missiles at Babylonia. It was shut down before the command could be executed, but now Ballard has the codes to launch those missiles. They are programmed to launch as soon as he dies, but despite the potential contamination leaks, Dominic releases a sealed message that stops the government from bombarding the area, and after Watanabe deals with Ballard, we join forces to re-establish a truce between the two factions. As the Hetero Zone keeps expanding, Cradle's next objective is the city of Kolong and its Tabula Akasha. Tabula Akasha is an ongoing process of digitization of all human knowledge in order to preserve humanity information in case of failure in defeating the punishing virus. Supported by Washu, the super I derived from Gestalt, even the consciousness of every human that dies in Kolong is uploaded into the Tabula Akasha. As a source of massive information, Tabula Akasha is Cradle's primary objective, but to achieve her goals, she collaborates with Schultz, a rogue awakened mechanoid that betrayed the Church of Machina. Originally, Schultz was a portion of Gestalt code that developed self-awareness as it was about to be deleted, resulting in an innate hatred towards humanity and the ambition of creating a world dominated by machines. Since they both originate from Gestalt, Schultz is able to hack into Washu and infiltrate Tabula Akasha, while Kolong is attacked by Cradle's hetero creatures. As the citizens of Kolong retreat further underground, Chu, the queen of Kolong, is killed by one of their subjects that works for Babylonia. It was an event that she had planned long ago thanks to Washu's simulations, and her consciousness is uploaded into Tabula Akasha, where she is able to deal with Schultz directly. However, before her final confrontation with Schultz, she encounters a Nanami from a distant future, the same Nanami that had already intervened to alter some past events. She receives an invitation from Nanami, an invitation that she is supposed to deliver to someone she trusts. In the meantime, the Commandant connects to Washu and Tabula Akasha, supporting Chu in her confrontation with Schultz. After erasing Schultz from Tabula Akasha, Cradle also retreats with her hetero creatures, leaving behind a devastated Kolong. Similarly to how the Ascension Network is able to reshape Ascendants, the Tabula Akasha reshaped Chu into a new frame, further showing the similarities between both methods of utilizing information. When she meets again with the Commandant, she explains that when Luna had attacked Kolong in the past, she had allowed her to take Washu in order to attack Babylonia. According to Washu's simulations, the confrontation between Luna and Gestalt was a necessary step to guarantee both Kolong and Tabula Akasha's survival in the future. After all, Luna's view on humanity changed after those events, making her a potential ally in the battle against the punishing virus. Then, since the Commandant is the only person that she truly trusts, she hands us Nanami's invitation. At this point, we know that the punishing virus is a form of concentrated information that can transcend space and time, and through a conversation between Gestalt and Dominic memory data sealed inside of it, we learn that even the Tabula Akasha was one of the many steps that they had taken against the punishing virus. A possible way to counterattack the contaminating memetics of the virus with another form of concentrated information. As the Hetero Zone keeps expanding on the surface, Asimov and Teddy, vice captain of the engineering force, are working to decode the invitation received by Chu. According to Asimov, Chu's invitation seems to be a way to interact with something sealed in the corrupted data of Gestalt. Eventually, Teddy hacks into Gestalt in order to create a safe path for the Commandant, and when we utilize the invitation, we are able to communicate with Dominic memory data. We learn about Dominic's actions and influence across multiple timelines in the attempt to fight the punishing virus, which is still an ongoing process. Despite this, there is much more that this Dominic cannot reveal, since doing so will release further contamination that could compromise this timeline. However, Dominic offers us the possibility of integrating ourselves into it, becoming part of the memory data since we meet the qualifications to become their successor, someone that might be able to influence and help other timelines. We refuse, choosing to believe in the people that we know and the rest of humanity that keeps fighting for survival in this timeline. However, the breach of Gestalt at Otherworld is the beginning of the end, the final part of the loop that connects countless timelines. When the punishing virus first appeared on Earth, its primary target was information itself. Gestalt, being the largest information hub of that time, was its first target. Through it, the contamination should have infiltrated everything, even text and language, but Gestalt had been designed to stop it. An essential component of the contamination was trapped inside of Gestalt, reducing its effectiveness. As a result, what is known as the punishing virus in this timeline is a weaker version of what it could have been. Nonetheless, after contaminating constructs, machines, and humans, it still acquired information belonging to humanity, and it used it to create the Ascension Network. Through the Ascension Network, Luna was the one that replaced the missing component trapped within Gestalt. However, now that Gestalt data wall has been breached, this trapped contamination named Agent Zero has been released. Since the Ascension Network started the refiltering process after the appearance of the Hetero Tower, Luna has been struggling with retaining her privileges as an agent. Celine, a puppet of the Ascension Network that has inherited Luna's authority, infiltrates Babylonia and escapes with Agent Zero. Their objective is to reach the Hetero Tower, where Agent Zero can fully merge with the Ascension Network. Luna and her Ascendants collaborate with Grey Raven, venturing into the Hetero Zone to make a deal with Cradle. Knowing that Dominic failed to find a successor, Vonnegut leaves his Ascendants and instructs Lithos to join Luna and give her important information that she can use to bargain with Cradle. In exchange for that information, Cradle allows Luna to use the Red Tide to pass the Ascension Network refiltering and restore her power. During the process, Cradle attempts to consume Luna. The Commandant stops her using an Omega weapon, then establishes a connection with Luna to stabilize her mind until she finishes the process. After that, Luna ventures into the Hetero Tower and confronts Celine, whose progress has been significantly slowed down by these changes to the tower, making it a hostile environment for Agent Zero. Even if she cannot prevent them from damaging the tower, Luna stops Celine before Agent Zero can merge with the Ascension Network, reacquiring her full privileges as an agent. After we refuse to become Dominic's successor, we'll remain on the invitation with a simple set of questions about the Hetero Tower and the contamination levels to gather information on the current timeline. At the end, it requires to input an unknown password, and after many failed attempts, we decide to try a variation of the code that our very clone had given to Lamia. The code written on the report that long ago had confirmed our incompatibility to the Tantalum copolymer that is essential to become a construct. The password is accepted. The invitation confirms that this timeline meets all requirements to utilize this key to enter and utilize the Hetero Tower. After switching to a new pirate frame, Lucia and the Commandant enter the Hetero Tower using Dominic's invitation. The pirate frame is developed utilizing data recovered from Project Winter, the Hyperreal frame, the Phantom Tracer, and the enhanced Omega weapon. Then all this has been combined utilizing the egg retrieved by Lamia as a carrier to create an Omega core. In comparison to the Hyperreal frame that is fully immune to the virus, the pirate can harness the virus and use it as an energy source similarly to an Ascendant. Despite all this, in our exploration of the tower, the Commandant dies over 70 times, and Lucia had to use the invitation to rewind the time in order to bring us back to life. However, even the invitation has a limit, and we are about to reach it. Many of these deaths were caused by Cradle. After Celine's defeat, Agent Zero recognized Cradle as the most suitable host, and as they merged, Cradle learned many things about herself. She was the original Agent Zero from another timeline. The Hetero Tower is her creation, and her goal is to harvest the civilizations. At the moment, her primary objective is to reclaim the Hetero Tower. In its current state, she's being rejected by its core because of Lee's alteration, but even that won't be able to stop her forever. Attempting to escape from Cradle, we use the tower to reach the city of Constellia during the Golden Age, before the punishing outbreak. However, Red Tide seems to have breached the Hetero Tower, and through it, Cradle is using it to submerge Constellia, sealed by Vonnegut's force field to prevent further contamination to that layer of the timeline. Chaos, the young hetero creature hatched by Vonnegut from one of Cotilla's eggs, is also assisting us, but their interference is limited and their real intentions are unclear. Vonnegut is trying to stop Cradle, but is taking advantage of Lucia's time rewinds in order to make Chaos mature at a faster rate, hoping that this will make her consciousness strong enough to rival Cradle and gain authority over Agent Zero without being consumed by it. However, to fully achieve this, Vonnegut wants to make the Commandant fuse with Chaos in order to further develop her consciousness. Through the information retrieved from Agent Zero, Cradle learns that even Vonnegut doesn't belong to this timeline. Also, Cradle starts to realize that their own personality is something implanted by Dominic. Agent Zero was supposed to be a set of directives that are now being obstructed by her personality. She attempts to erase it, but she is only partially successful. Another discovery is that Cradle is also responsible for eliminating Dominic and his team in their timeline, but the details of the event are corrupted and inaccessible. What she knows for certain is that Dominic's team produced a key that is able to hack into the Hetero Tower through Chaos Contamination, the stronger version of the punishing virus that appeared in Dominic's timeline. A key that can be used to alter the tower function, or even remove its core. Through the many time rewinds and due to her pirate frame, Lucia experiences many different futures, each of them a different form of failure. However, as we are once again killed by Cradle, her key runs out of power and Lucia is forced to deal with Vonnegut in exchange for a last rewind. Her final opportunity to allow us to survive the seemingly endless loop of death. Vonnegut still intends to merge us with Chaos, allowing her to acquire authority over Agent Zero and consequently the Red Tide. Lucia will never agree with that, but we also have another plan. Through a Vonnegut from a different layer of the same timeline, we learn that the contaminating memetics emerge alongside zero-point energy, and that they prioritize infiltrating the most advanced technology of the time, assuming a different form depending on the target. In Dominic's future, the contaminating memetics targeted the time travel pod, while in this timeline, they targeted Gestalt in the form of the punishing virus. The chaos contamination that manifested in Dominic's future showed symptoms that resemble schizophrenia. It infected people with a sense of futility that ultimately ends with death in a way that transcends time itself, like something inevitable regardless of changes or precautions to avoid it. This contamination is partially why all the future experienced through the tower are often cycles of futility and failure. After the disappearance of Dominic, Nemo, also a member of his team, used his key to send information to the past, communicating with Professor Trout in our current timeline. He sent information about the chaos contamination, and eventually, when the zero-point reactor was activated and the punishing outbreak began, he traveled to this timeline and merged his consciousness with the Professor, eventually assuming the name of Vonnegut. Vonnegut was not an actual agent of the Ascension network, but it was merely emulating their power by using force field technology from the future and by developing a stronger mind by fusing it with many lesser consciousnesses. He started experimenting on the Red Tide in order to create a key that he could eventually use to control the Hetero Tower, but the tower appeared before he expected, and he wasn't fully ready for it. Through Ishmael, Vonnegut himself discovered that the Hetero Tower is a pathway towards another gate that leads to a universe without life. The contamination that manifests alongside zero-point energy is supposed to test the civilizations, growing and evolving with them. It's meant to be a tool, but if a civilization fails to master it, all their information will be harvested and recycled by it. A fate that has consumed countless civilizations before them. Only the civilizations that are deemed worthy are allowed to pass through the gate, preserving their data seed through the inevitable heat death and eventually be reborn when the universe starts anew. After learning all this, the Commandant proposes another plan to Vonnegut. Remove the tower core and kill Cradle, allowing Chaos to merge with Agent Zero even in her incomplete state, just to buy time, while we deliver the tower core to the Science Council in order to be studied. This was Dominic's original plan, a plan that he failed to accomplish in his timeline when killed by Cradle. Initially, Vonnegut reluctantly agrees with this plan, but as an ultimate gesture of revenge, Cradle causes serious damage to the tower as she dies, a last display of humanity in her final moments. Because of this action, the tower's exits have been compromised, and Chaos struggles to contain the surging Red Tide as she merges with Agent Zero. At this point, the safest approach will be for the Commandant to fuse with her and strengthen her authority, but Lucia confronts Vonnegut to avoid this outcome. Eventually, Vonnegut allows us to leave the tower, bearing us access until we find a proper solution, and he works to mend it from the inside together with Chaos. As soon as we exit the tower, Lucia collapses. For all this time, her Omega core had been sustained by the high concentration of punishing virus inside the tower, but now she has no more energy. She needs to reach Babylonia and switch to her older frame, but as we look around, we realize that there is no clean zone around the tower and that we are instead in a devastated world. Eventually, we manage to contact some survivors, and we discover that 30 years have passed since we first entered the tower. Cradle's damage to the tower caused them to exit at the wrong point in time, and during these 30 years, a mutated Red Tide had expanded almost over the entire planet, wiping out most of the human population. Babylonia, unable to fight against the growing threat, had left Earth in search of another future far away, leaving behind only a small group of survivors. We had retrieved the Hetero core and brought it outside of the tower, something that no one had ever accomplished in any previous timeline, but now there was no one left that could study it. Unable to find a replacement for her current frame, Lucia eventually dies in her hands. Vanessa, a fellow Commandant now turned into a construct, is leading the remaining survivors, and after recovering from Lucia's death, we help her out, learning more about what happened in these 30 years. Rosa, one of Asimov's young assistants, is now the best scientist left on Earth. She doesn't have enough equipment to fully study the Hetero core that we retrieved, but she starts working on it. Luna is also helping the remaining humans, defending them against the mutated Red Tide. She is the only Ascendant left, and even her power is weakened. She used the Ascension network extensively in the attempt to find a solution to their future, sacrificing her own eyesight in the process, and still failed. However, we coming out of the tower was not an outcome of any of her simulations. Even Nanami and the Church of Machina have left Earth long ago, since, according to their simulations, it was the only way to give humanity a chance of survival. However, Nanami had left behind something for us, a full sensory simulation device, similar to the invitation received from Chu. The device requires a lot of computing power, and since Gestalt left Earth with Babylonia, their only option is to reach Cologne and hope that Washu is still functional. Upon reaching Cologne, we discover that Chu is the only one left, the final protector of Washu and the Tabula Kasha. Chu reveals that even in her simulations we never left the tower. Only Nanami, by leaving that device behind, seemed to have expected that outcome, and after connecting it to Washu, we activate their invitation. We see memories of the Church of Machina preparing to leave Earth, Nanami switching into a new frame, Nanami attempting to enter the tower to save us, Nanami communicating with Chaos, unable to fully control the mutating Red Tide, Nanami discussing with Ishmael about the future, Nanami running more simulations with Gestalt and its inability to simulate a future where we leave the tower. And eventually, we managed to reach out, joining Nanami in many of her countless simulations in the attempt to find the right path that will lead us out of the tower. In one of the simulations, we discovered that Nanami herself had been created by Dominic, a last hope of preserving humanity through awakened mechanoids. But Nanami became much more than that, since she never gave up on humans. Eventually, every timeline leads to a final destination, the DeLorean Discovery, the spaceship where Nanami from a distant future resides. The same Nanami that obtained the original invitation from Dominic and delivered it to us through Chu and the Tabula Kasha. The same Nanami that sent the Hetero shard in the past when Bianca defeated the corrupted Chico. The shard that was used to complete the Hyperion frame, allowing Lee to enter the tower and rewrite its core. Despite arriving to the Hetero simulation, the ship itself is not part of one. Its location is beyond the gate, the same gate connected to the Hetero Tower, the universe devoid of life, meant to preserve the seed of civilizations that were deemed worthy. This Nanami is the administrator beyond the gate, but further interference from her position will be noticed, causing an even faster decline of their civilization since it has already been marked by the contaminating memetics. However, there is one last gift that she can provide: hope. When we regain our senses in Cologne, to retrieve a Hetero shard from the Red Tide, a shard that future Nanami sent to the space-time coordinate, containing information to decode the tower core. Nanami sacrificed their entire existence for this purpose, simulating outcomes with the only hope that their intervention will be enough to help us reshape a different future. Only consciousnesses that have been acknowledged by the higher beings can exist beyond the gate, and when the DeLorean went through, her fellow mechanoids had been erased, leaving her alone in an eternal voyage. As Rosa continues her research on the tower core using the Hetero shard provided by Nanami, the situation against the mutated Red Tide worsens. Eventually, Chaos is consumed by Agent Zero, fully losing control on the Red Tide. Luna sacrifices herself to save us, allowing us to escape, but as the Red Tide keeps spreading, Aerospace City becomes the last bastion of humanity. Eventually, as an ultimate gesture to buy more time for the surviving humans, we decide to enter into the Red Tide. Using a special device that stabilizes our consciousness, we plan to become a cancer to the Red Tide, slowing it down as much as possible to let Rosa complete the research. However, Ishmael intervenes and pulls us out, knowing that such a gesture has no real future. Ishmael revealed that she is a gatekeeper, a projection that observes civilizations marked for filtering. Dominic's original timeline failed the test against the contaminating memetics, but in their attempts, they ended up infecting another timeline, this one. Dominic tried to salvage this by finding successors, while Vonnegut tried to find a way to coexist with the punishing virus, but in the end, they both failed. As a gatekeeper, Ishmael gives us the opportunity to re-enter the Hetero Tower, and if we pass its trials, we can proceed through the gate and acquire new powers to possibly make adjustments to this timeline. At the time, Lee had completed the trials, but had refused to go through the gate because he didn't want to leave the rest of humanity behind, and chose to rewrite the tower core instead. Not even Ishmael knows exactly what we will be capable of in case of success, but it's still an opportunity, and we accept her offer, entering the tower once again. As we explore the tower, countless past and futures overlap as we re-experience all our previous battles, all our failures and achievements. But in each one of them, we were never alone. And even now, we are simply a beacon of human civilization, determined to push forward despite all the risks and unlikelihood of success. Eventually, we complete the tower's trials, acquiring a higher power, but since its core is outside, we cannot change the timeline with the tower. We acquired the authority to become an observer like Ishmael, and the ability to use the punishing virus to preserve human civilization in a timeless state, preventing it from being recycled. This was Ishmael's own choice, opting of preserving her civilization which she became an observer. However, this is not the outcome that we want. A frozen civilization is as good as dead, but there is one last thing that we can attempt. We use our newfound power to return to the Ascendant base at the bottom of the sea, implanting our consciousness into one of our clones so that we can merge with Chaos. The difference between this and Vonnegut's original plan was that even a complete chaos created using the consciousness of our past self will eventually succumb to the will of the Red Tide. However, a chaos with the consciousness of someone that passed the Tower's trial will have absolute power, allowing us to pull back the timeline before the Tower's arrival. This is a path that no one has ever foreseen, and a single misstep will send the entire civilization in an endless time loop, where we'll have to experience our own death over and over again. We are determined to take this gamble, but we still ask Ishmael to deliver Rosa's research data to Administrator Nanami as a precaution. When we regain our senses, we find ourselves in the cradle of the deep blue, but as we re-experience everything that had happened then, we start to realize that all this time it had always been us down there. Our own consciousness, even if constrained by the rules imposed by the higher beings. Eventually, when our body is consumed by the punishing virus infection, our consciousness hatches into chaos. Even Vonnegut realizes that this chaos is more complete than he expected, but he still proceeds with his original plan, leading chaos into the tower. Since this time Lucia is not with us, dealing with Cradle proves to be a lot more difficult. Eventually, Vonnegut confirms that we are chaos, but despite the mutual distrust, we decide to cooperate. He gives us his key, then he begins the process of merging his own body to the tower, joining the other members of Dominic's Vanguard team that had already been consumed by it. This triggers an explosion that consumes Cradle, and we use Vonnegut's key to contain the tower core and obtain Agent Zero authority. With this newfound power, we attempt to use the tower to bring this timeline to a previous layer, but we realize that we cannot. The past and future altered through the tower have not disappeared, adding layer upon layer. Going back while their foundation is unstable will make the entire tower collapse, ending their civilization. Ishmael knew about this. It's one of the higher being rules, but because of their constraints, she was unable to inform us beforehand. However, refusing to give up, we start pruning all the unnecessary layers, experiencing countless failures as we remove them one by one. The amount of information is overwhelming, but we do not stop. We see countless civilizations fail their test and being harvested, but one in particular draws our attention. Ishmael's civilization was extremely advanced. They had expanded across multiple galaxies, and they were even able to harvest the energy of the stars. At the time, Ishmael was a young researcher that was studying the heat death of the universe, and eventually, her mentor developed a time machine to aid them in their studies. Initially, it seemed like the time machine was working properly, and Ishmael's mentor was able to send their information back in time. However, the information that Ishmael was receiving was incomplete, as if it had been corrupted. Nonetheless, the underlying message was clear. The heat death of the universe, something that seemed so far-fetched and a problem for a distant future, was now deemed an imminent threat. To escape from this catastrophe, the civilization started massive experiments to find a substance capable of storing information, hoping that they could use it to store and preserve their civilization. Eventually, they succeeded. They labeled it Substance Zero, and they began the process of replicating their civilization. Something that they consider like a form of evolution, seizing the current life and becoming part of this substance, appearing in the form of a dense white mist. Something that was eerily similar to the Red Tide projections. Eventually, Substance Zero manifested corrosive traits, and it began to evolve, consuming life to create a new one. This was the form of punishing virus. It didn't matter how advanced that civilization was, it was still targeted by the higher beings. Just like you, Ishmael tried to save her civilization, going through countless of cycles using the time machine, until eventually she obtained Substance Zero authority and used it to seal her civilization, becoming an observer. As an observer, she saw countless civilizations being harvested by this contamination, and as far as she knows, no one ever succeeded. Initially, she was a mere projection and used by your civilization, until she saw us, someone that might have influenced her in a distant past. We still have the opportunity to join her, preserving our civilization and becoming an observer, but we don't. We resume our efforts and rearrange the tower countless layers formed by Cradle and Vonnegut's interference, enduring the agony caused to our mind by the vast information that we have to process. Not even a higher dimensional being can withstand all this information, but there is someone that can help with its processing. Nanami, having set us as our anchor point on Earth, is helping us by converging and organizing all the information of the current layers with her computing power. After witnessing all this, humanity's unwavering determination in saving their civilization, Ishmael goes against the higher being rules and provides her own help, deeming our civilization worthy of another chance. At the end of this long, painful process, the timeline resets to original state before the tower arrival, and all traces of Vonnegut's interference have been erased. Besides Ishmael, and possibly Nanami, it appears that the Commandant is the only one that remembers the other timelines, but even Lucia has nightmares related to those events. Ishmael and future Nanami's interference was subtle enough to avoid being detected by the higher beings, giving the appearance that we are still stuck in a closed loop. We still don't know the full details of this restored timeline, but it seems that many crucial events have happened despite Vonnegut's absence, as if they are inevitable events regardless of the timeline's current layer. I've read hundreds of stories, and my first reaction when they introduced time travel in PGR was, oh no. Normally I'm very skeptical, but at least so far they managed to do a good job with it, so we'll have to see what happens in the following years. Anyway, I hope that I didn't butcher the story too much. There are many major events, characters and little details that I haven't mentioned, but it's almost impossible to condense dozens of hours worth of reading without sacrificing something. As I said before, I just hope that this pushes more people into experiencing the full story for themselves. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in 5 years to celebrate PGR EOS.